Okay, pre-calc, let's try this again. This is A7. This is the third video for this section. I'm spending a lot of time on this to make sure you get it. Alright, so again, this is the front term, this is the back term. Your brain has to see that there's like two distinct separate terms. You then want to see if there's anything you can simplify here, and there's really, in this front one, there's not. But I still want to put it in a I tend to write things from the simpler looking part to the more complicated. So I'm just choosing to put the 2 in the front. Our brains tend to recognize patterns, so I tend to put the smaller stuff in the front, and then I can very quickly figure out what's common with the smaller stuff and what's common with the more complicated stuff. Okay, now the back one. So I see this piece and I see this piece, so I can put that together. Your brain literally wants to see that as if that's sitting together, like 1/2 times 8x, which would be 4x, okay? Now some people might go a step farther and combine it with this. It's just the student's preference. So I make suggestions on how to solve these, but if you have a good technique that works, that's certainly just as good. Alright, we were talking about this in the last video. So you have an exponent raised to an exponent, so 1/2 times 2, that's going to be a 1. Right, we don't usually write the 1, but that's what I did there. I just calculated the new exponent. Alright, let's move on now to the common factor. So scan this and try to figure out what you think the common factor of this is. So I see that it has a 2 here and it has a 4 here. So the common factor for these numbers would be a 2. Now I'm going to look at this binomial. It's to the half. This one's to the negative 1/2. So the smallest, the lowest, would be to the negative 1/2. Alright, and I then tend to put up a bracket at this point, and I'm going to now figure out what the leftover is from the common factor. Alright, so let's figure out the leftover. So from the front half, this separates the front and the back, so from the front half, I pulled out the 2. The bank, or what I started with, was a 1/2, but I'm taking out a 1/2. Make sure you do that correctly. We talked about this. You're starting with a 1/2, but you're subtracting a negative 1/2. Because you have to subtract what you're taking out, which means you're adding, which means that'll become a 1, okay? Because it's 1/2 minus a minus 1/2. I'm just going to put the 1 here because some people are very visual and they need to see that's what I did. I just calculated that. 1/2 minus a minus 1/2 is a 1. Alright, that's all that's left from the front. I'm done. That's the leftover from the front. Now the negative is in the middle. It separates the back from the front. Alright, so now I'm going to do the common factor on the back. So we'll start with 4 divided by 2 is 2, right? You take the common factor 2 out of there. I still have an x. I still have this 2x plus 3, that's not a common factor. But this matches this, so we're going to take that whole piece out. Okay, so we get that. Alright, so now let's clean this up in here. So I'm going to distribute the 2x. Be careful when you distribute it because it's a negative 2x. So if I just write it above for a minute. Make sure you put the negative to both. Alright, so that's, now in the next step, let's combine that completely. So 4x squared minus 4x squared, okay, that goes. 9 minus 6x, we can fiddle with that a little bit, but you can also swap the order if you'd like. right, I'm just gonna, this 2 out front here, I'm just gonna sit it here. This negative guy means it can flip down. I'll just add an extra step here if it helps. Because it's negative, it's gonna come down to the bottom. But if you notice, there's already another one down at the bottom that has the same base. So that means you can add these. You have a half plus 1. Remember, when things are neighbors, you can add them. I just make up a quick example here. I'm making this up, okay? When things are neighbors, you add them. 1/2 plus 1 is 3/2. So it's the same idea here, just the base is more sophisticated. But it's the same idea. If you want, and it's just up to you, you can leave the numerator like this, but technically you could take a 3 out of here. Some people will also take a negative and flip the order. That's just really up to you. But if you take a 3 out of this part, you would then multiply it by the 2 in front. And you get that. And again, some people will take out a negative, flip the order. You know, I'll pay attention on your tests to which way you're writing the answer. I like it when you think for yourself. So I'm all good with that. Okay, gang. You may want to watch these last 2 videos over again to make sure you got these concepts. This is a really, really important section. This will be on test 1. This will be on your final exam. This is a really important concept. You will see this definitely on both of those exams, so learn it now so you get all those points, okay? All right, catch you again in another section. Bye-bye.